Usually, in most any documentary that you might do, there will probably be one or two interviews at least, and you will need to create a title graphic. And our little project here that we're working on is no exception. We had to come up with a little title graphic for a couple of interviews. And I have really kind of changed my view on this over the years. I used to have this huge lower third with the big flashy entrance, and using After Effects created these wild effects. But these days I've kind of shifted towards a more simple approach and just to have
We do everything together.
a very subtle on and off. And I still use After Effects usually to create these titles because I like the way After Effects has a variety of different options as to how to animate your text on. And because I have access to After Effects, I usually default to that without thinking too much about how to do it in Edius. However, I do realize that not everyone has access to the Adobe software, or even if they do have access to it, as to how to use it. And since this is a tutorial series on how to work and edit with Edius, I thought it would only be appropriate to try and come up with a title graphic using the title tool that ships with Edius. That is called QuickTitler, and you can access QuickTitler either from the bin menu up here. Just click on the big T. There's also a way to access it down here, and I'm going to use this approach because this, with the little down arrow there, you'll see that one of your options here is to actually create a title in a new title track. So even though you may have started your project without this special title track that is available in Edius, as I think I recommended as we started our project, that we just won't be worrying about that. We don't use those title tracks anymore. We just use a video track to add our graphics. The thing is that when you are working with QuickTitler, actually having this title track, this special title track that is available in Edius, gives you access to a few effects from your effect bin that are only usable if you do have this special title track. And having these effects available will give us a few options as to how to maybe animate that text on that title graphic, just like we've done here with After Effects by just kind of fading it on slowly. Having access to these title effects will give us something similar to that, using this soft wipe effect from our folder of title mixers. But again, these are only possible to use when you are working with this special title track. Notice if we try to use one of these title effects on just a regular graphic that we've brought in from After Effects, that there's no way to apply any of these effects onto that type of graphic. And if we just created a regular title graphic in QuickTitler and didn't have this title track to pop it into, we wouldn't be able to have access to some of these special wipes. Okay, so what we're going to do then is create a title. With the drop-down arrow there, we're going to select the option to create a title in a new title track. And notice that this is really the only way to actually add a title track. It used to be in previous versions of Edius that you could just go over to this left-hand panel, right-click, go to Add, and then have the access to add a title track. That's no longer available, so if you've been looking for it there and you've been thinking, well, I guess you just can't add it, you have to start a new project and set it up that way. Well, there is this option of adding a title track under this tool here. Okay, so we've clicked on that. It opens up our titling tool. Let's minimize it a little bit. You might wonder, well, where's the track? Nothing really has changed here. But if we were to scroll down here, we would see that the title track has shown up here. And it's actually placed a graphic in place here, ready to edit. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this title tool. If you have never worked with the QuickTitler tool from Edius, you might find your first attempt a little bit frustrating, and you may actually from your first experience, your first impression, just kind of scratch your head and wonder if it's something that's even usable, whether it is something that you could use in a professional project, because it's just a little bit odd looking. Some of the presets, or most all of the presets that are available here, come with the program by default, or funky and unusable. It just looks like a very unprofessional tool. And as you begin to work with it, things just don't work like you think they should. It's very counterintuitive. But just by learning a few tricks and tips, it's actually quite easy to work with, and it is fairly functional. It is something that you can use in a professional environment. You wouldn't necessarily want to have this as your only tool. If you're really getting into the business of doing video professionally, you probably want to think seriously about getting After Effects or some other very professional titler that actually works together and can plug into the Edius environment. But in a pinch, we can work with QuickTitler. So let's see how we can do that. You will see the blinking cursor here. That means that you are ready to start typing. But before we do, we should actually take a look and see if there's any preset that we could point to that would come close to what we would want the title to look like, at least as a first setting. I have already added a few of my own presets here, like this Mirrored Pro one down here, so you might not be seeing all of the ones that I have listed here. So maybe just as a demonstration here, I will pick one that I believe is there. Maybe this Style 1 should be there by default on yours as well, so we can work together on maybe making some changes to that preset and then save that as show you how to save your own presets. Okay, so you see the flashing cursor there. That means that you are ready to start typing. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is just reproduce the title that we have here. And don't worry how awful it looks. In fact, as you're typing yours, it probably is looking a lot worse than what you're seeing here, because by default, Edius does not show you a full high-resolution version of the text. And so your text is probably looking, let's see, something more like that. You're wondering, well, what on earth, what can I do with that? Well, what this is a very low resolution version of it, and it allows people with slower computers to be able to make titles. But if you want to see it in the resolution that it's going to actually look like on the screen, just go up to this little A with the magnifying glass, click on that, and then from now on, as you work with the title, it should be in this high resolution, full resolution mode. Each time you open the QuickTitler from this point on, it should have that. If you start running into problems with a slower computer, you might want to shut that off, but otherwise you can leave that on. Now, as we look at this title, we see that it has a dark border around it, and that, depending on your personal preferences, may not be exactly what you were looking for. So let's go and make some changes to that. Let's point and click on our title graphic. Notice at this point, after we've left the graphic and we go and point and click on it the second time, you might be going in trying to type in it at this point, and you're wondering, well, why can't I type? Why can't I make changes? Well, after you leave the graphic and you come back and click on it, what this is allowing you to do now is reposition it. You'll notice that the little menu strip along the left-hand side, the square here, the outline, has moved to the pointer tool. And that shows that we can now point to it and move it around. If we want to actually go in and make some changes, what you have to do is go in and double-click inside the box. And now your cursor will show up and you can start typing again, making changes like you want. Okay, so let's select our item. And if you do have trouble selecting it at this point, just make sure that you have the little arrow up here selected. And once it's selected, you should be able to point and click anywhere in the area of the text, and you'll get this border that surrounds it. And now we can either move it around or we can make changes to the styling of the graphic. And we do that over here in Text Properties. Let's, for example, say we want to change the font. I like Mirrored Pro, so that's what I usually use for my title graphics. However, we don't necessarily like the black border. And so here's where we can get rid of that. This little place where it says edge, you can unclick that. And that gets rid of the edge. But we do like to have just a little bit of a drop shadow on it. So let's add that. We can go down to shadow. Let's click on that. By default, the shadow seems to be white. But we can change the color of our drop shadow just down here. Just click on this little white box, and then let's get something that actually looks like a drop shadow. Choose a black or close to black. Watch the warning area here. It might not be the best to actually go into where you start getting the exclamation mark showing up there. You want to have a 0 black would be the most ideal. Let's hit OK. Now we've got our black drop shadow, but we see that it's offset, probably just a little too much. So let's reposition it with our horizontal and vertical slider here. Maybe just have 2 points off to the right, and then it's probably needs to come up just a little bit. So that's probably a better drop shadow. However, it's probably still too harsh, too black. We want it to be more of a gray drop shadow. So let's work with our transparency on that. Here's one of those places where the controllers here are just a little bit counterintuitive, or at least different than other programs that you may be familiar with. The transparency, it's like it's saying right now it is 0 transparent. It's fully opaque. And what you want to do is, if you want it to be what you would normally think of as 20% in Photoshop or After Effects, you need to move that to be about 80% in this case with the QuickTitler. So now it's 80% transparent, if you want to think of it that way. Now, as we look back at our tool, we see that now that we've dropped it down to 80%, we could probably move our horizontal back just a little bit so we can see just a little bit more of that drop shadow. Maybe put it to 5. Okay, I like that. And once you've defined a graphic text the way that you like, and you think it might be something that you would want to use in future titles, well, here's where you want to set your own preset on that. And with your text still selected, just go up to Style and choose Save as New Style, and then give that style a name. So I might call this Mirrored with Drop Shadow. And hit OK, and now you'll see your new style showing up here, so that next time that you want to create a title graphic that uses the same font and stylization, well, you can just click on your preset and be ready to go. You don't have to waste time making all of these changes every time. To create a second line of text, let's just go over to our big T over here, and while we see our cursors already flashing, now we can just start typing in our second line of text. And let's select the whole text. Just drag your mouse across the whole text, or you could probably just hit Control A to select all the text in the box. And let's change our font size, probably something like 40. And then once we click out of it and click back in, we've reached that point where we can use our mouse pointer to reposition. As we work with this, trying to position it up with the other one, it sometimes helps to click outside of the box so the box isn't confusing you to see if you're lining up. We do have tools here that can overlay a grid that might help us line up. By following a certain line there, we can make sure that we're getting our text all lined up, and then you can shut the grid off. If you want to check title safe, you can click on this little tool down here to make sure that your graphic is in a title safe zone. For if your video is going out to broadcast, you want to make sure it's inside this inside rectangle. Okay, as I look at this, I might want to reduce the size of this just a little bit. So select all of that text and maybe drop it back to about 36. Okay, and then we can select, well, first of all, let's do a little background area here. You'll notice that the title graphic that I created in After Effects has kind of a little rounded rectangle, shadowy backdrop for the text. And it might not have been necessary for this particular setup, but if you are placing your title graphic over something that's quite a bit lighter or whitish, then having this little background can help add some definition to your text. And that is something that we can do in QuickTitler. Just click on this little rectangle blue box that you have here, and then just bring your mouse over and just draw kind of all the way around the text. Don't worry too much if you can't get it positioned exactly. We can change that, but just let your mouse go. By default, it creates a background that is about 50% transparent. And notice how we can change the positioning of any of the edges here. It doesn't seem to allow us to have the nice rounded corners that you can get in After Effects, but it's still not too bad. Right now, the gray box, let's call it gray, or it's actually a black box, as we can tell over here. The fill color is black, but because it's 50% transparent, we'll call it gray. Right now, it's over top of our graphics, and that isn't what we want. So we want to send this to the back. So let's go up to Layout and change the order of that. Let's send it to the back. Well, that sent at least back one layer. Let's try again. Okay, so now we've got 3 layers here. We've got the black rectangle, and then we've got 2 lines of text. Okay, now this might be just a little bit darker than what I would like, and so over here we can adjust the transparency. Under Fill Color, we can change this to be whatever strength you want. Remember, the direction is just a little counterintuitive with the QuickTitler. So maybe something like that would be fine, 70, 75%. Okay, and then once you have that the way you like it, now we can reposition this to be wherever we want. Let's click on all of the layers. Let's say we want it down kind of where we had the other one. Well, at least that brought our shadow back. So we're not too confused here by the other one showing up. Let's save what we've done so far. Save. And that will show up in whatever bin that you had open. So right now it's going into Flower's story. We'll probably want to drop that into graphics. And we could then rename that to whatever we want. We'll call it Pawa's title. Okay, and so let's now shut off this item here. Or just delete it, so it won't be so confusing as we work with our title. Let's maybe close this, give ourselves a little room, and maybe open up our title graphic area a bit, and maybe open up our timeline a little bit so we can see our graphic. And if you're having a hard time seeing this, sometimes when you add a title late in the game, it might not be showing up. The way that your video tracks are defined here in your timeline window. When you added that title track, or used the drop-down menu to create a title in a title track, it might not have even shown up there, and you might be wondering, well, where is it? Well, you just have to move this video track up and then look for it down here. It is there. Maybe move the audio portion down a bit, and then it starts to show up. So it should look something like, you should be able to work with your timeline over here in various ways, making adjustments to the audio portion, the video portion, and then the video tracks themselves to open up this title track so that you can see it something like this. And when you've got it like that, to work with your title graphic, you can just double click on it, and that'll open up your QuickTitler so that you can continue to make changes. So let's choose our selector tool, the pointer up here. Now we can point to this graphic and position it over top of our gray box, and then also get the second title, put it in place, check and see your positioning. Looks pretty good. We could check the grid here. Maybe the paw wall could come over just a little bit. Once you have it selected, you can also use your arrow keys on your computer just to nudge it into place. Maybe it needs to go up a little bit. Okay, let's shut off our grid and our title safe and take a look, and that's pretty good. Perhaps the gray box itself could be positioned just a little, changed a little bit. And I'm thinking I might like to have it over just a little bit. And then let's choose our 2 pieces of text. I think we can select them both, and then with our arrow key push them over, both of them over at the same time. Well, it might be quicker to move them with your mouse and then nudge them. Okay, that's not too bad. And so let's save that. You can either go up to File and choose Save, or just by closing out your title tool, it'll ask you, do you want to save the changes you made? And you will hit yes, and that'll automatically update the title that's already in your bin, as well as make the change here. Now, as we take a look at it in our place here, in this smaller window, there might not be enough area in between the 2 lines of text. Let's open that up again and just maybe lower this one here just a little bit. Try that. And now bringing it on. Let's go over to our effects palette. And here under title mixers, we have the option of selecting a variety of different ways to bring on our title graphic. The one that I like the most is a soft wipe. You can try them all out and see what you like the best, but I like the soft wipe, and we're going to drop on the soft wipe right to bring on our title. And you do that just by simply dragging it and dropping it right into this little bottom area there where it shows the yellow scale there that goes from the top down to the bottom. So let's see what that looks like.
Dozen is my best friend. We do.
And that gives you a little animation on. It's not quite as nice as what it was happening with an After Effects, but it does still have a slight animation in. If you'd like to try and make some adjustments to that, you can double click on the actual effect down here, and you do get some options that you can try. You can try adjusting the width of that wipe. Let's try and see what that does.
Dozen is my best.
And so you can see that comes in a little slower, a little softer. Let's see what it looks like all the way.
Dozen is my best.
Yeah, I like that a little better. We can also make it come on a little slower yet by grabbing the end of this transition and stretching it out. And then let's try again.
Dozen is my best friend.
And there we go. I think I like that. And then for it to come off, now we see that it isn't quite positioned right for our... So let's move that over and see what that looks like.
Dozen is my best friend. We do everything together. If I ever have...
Yeah, that's not too bad. We see it's just dissolving off at the moment. If we wanted to, we could probably use one of these transitions again to come off with.
Everything together.
And so you can experiment with the various options available to you here for either bringing your text on or taking it off. Of course, the other option is to not use the title track at all and just create your titles in QuickTitler and drop them onto a video track and simply dissolve them up. Just because you're using QuickTitler does not mean that you have to use a title track. I should have pointed that out. You can still bring in any graphic that you have made in QuickTitler and just drop it on any layer of video and use it right in the video layer as well. And of course, then you can dissolve that. Is just to open up our mix track here by hitting this little arrow over here, turning on our mix. And then, as you have probably learned by now, you can dissolve anything on using the mix track on a video track. And now we can dissolve that title on. And that's still fine. You know, it's nice to have the animation, but if you're not that keen on having this distracting title track and you feel that you don't really need to have that little wipe on, that nice wipe on, well, you can just go with a dissolve. And that way you can just use any video track to place the titles that you create with QuickTitler. Okay, well, I hope that that gives you a good idea of how you can create a title graphic using QuickTitler.